Hello everybody, my name's James, and for the benefit of those listening back to the audio, you're listening to Ask James, my regular YouTube live stream where I welcome questions from the YouTube community on anything football related. At timestamp, it's just gone past 12 PM UK time on Friday, July the 11th, and I might have a smile on my face today, as I've mentioned on socials, following some very unexpected Tottenham news over the last 24 hours. I can see some questions have already come in on that, so I'm going to get straight into the questions. As usual, I'll answer them in order of submission. Repeat/similar questions may well be skipped. I will cover up until 1 PM UK time or earlier if I get through all the questions before then. Steve's first says, hey James, what is happening with Forest and how will Morgan Gibbs-White fit in with Spurs? Does that mean lots of outgoings for your team? I think in terms of what's going on with Forest, essentially it sounds like there was a release clause for Morgan Gibbs-White that we weren't aware that was there, and Tottenham have obviously activated that yesterday. Then it's up to the player seems keen to move, so it looks like that's going to happen. In terms of Anthony Elanga, if that happens, I guess Tottenham if that happens, Newcastle obviously paid a really big fee for Elanga, something that's too high, some might think it's too low. The player will probably have a desire to play Champions League football, which obviously Forest just missed out on. So it's two key players gone from attacking sense, but we've still got some very valuable players there, such as Murillo, Elliot Anderson, etc. I think what's important for Forest is obviously that they re-spend the money wisely, considering I think they obviously needed a bit of a bulk up of the squad anyway because of the added European competition next season. If they stay in the Conference League, that might not be quite so necessary in relation to they could yet get bumped up to the Europa League, obviously, if Crystal Palace get removed. In terms of Morgan Gibbs-White and how he fits in, I'd say what he does do, he fits straight into that best team, wherever that is. What I love about him, I spoke about it briefly on this stream on Saturday in response to a question I'd had a couple of weeks ago about several different players, and I said I'd love to get Morgan Gibbs-White. Didn't think it was possible when I said it. It was kind of a throwaway comment, more about my appraisal and really liking for him as a player, because I really love his off the ball work. Wherever he plays, I think he plays with intent, with aggression, with pace, with intelligence. He can operate as a 10. I've seen plenty of times towards the end of that season where he operated a lot more like a number 8 in a deeper role. And I think Tottenham have a bit of an issue in sort of the 8 position at the moment, more of a central midfield, a bit of a deeper line. So it might be that we see him there. I think his range of passing in terms of long distance passing is very underrated. He's very off the cuff with a lot of the things he does, like I said, with pace and intent and what he does. But I like him best as a 10. And I think ultimately he would be a better number 10 for Tottenham than James Maddison or Dejan Kulusevski. And a lot of that's to do with the pressing from the front. Dominic Solanke is an extremely good defensive forward, and I think Morgan Gibbs-White alongside him would give Tottenham a bit of a pressing edge that would be one of the best in the league if that's how Tottenham decide to go and play, and with a little bit of a better defensive structure under Thomas Frank now. So difficult to say at the moment, but you can operate in different positions. So if Tottenham are sort of shorter, which you might argue they are at the moment in terms of central midfield, yes, I could see him deeper, more of an 8, with perhaps a Maddison ahead of him, for example. But I like him best as a 10, personally. But he could play both roles. And Tottenham have been, I think, desirably looking for players that can play in different positions. And he really adds to that. The other thing, do you know what he'll really add? Something many of you have heard me question about Tottenham over the last couple of years. I think there's a real missing ingredient of leadership within that group. And I'm not saying he'll bring it instantaneously, but I think he's a leader. Ultimately, he was Nottingham Forest captain. And that's come from a position where many questioned his attitude after he left Wolves. I think he's very much proven himself within that regard. He's a winner. I see a winner on the football pitch that has real desire all the time. And I think that's going to bring something really important to our team. I'm absolutely delighted about it. Does it mean there'll be lots of outgoings? Yeah, I think that was the case anyway, because Tottenham squad's too bloated, right? If you just take the left wing position at the moment, particularly now that the Mohamed Kudus deal has been confirmed, we know that the intention really is probably for him to play on the right-hand side. Obviously, Brennan Johnson played there a lot last year, but there has been some speculation about using him from the left. Morgan Gibbs-White, assuming this deal goes through and comes in, obviously opens up for Kulusevski potentially to play back on that side. So you got Kulusevski, Kudus, Johnson, all pretty comfortable on the right. And on the left-hand side, you got Heung-min Son, Matisse Tell, Wilson Odobert, Mana Solomon, and Mikey Moore trying to break through into the squad as well. Like, there's too many players. So, yeah, there'll be outgoings. We've got so many centre-backs. If Romero stays, and it's beginning to look more and more like he might. Van der Ven, Rado Dragishin's obviously injured. Ben Davis has re-signed for another year. There's Kevin Danso. There's Luka Vuskovic. We bought the new lad, what's his name? Takai from Japan. We've got too many players. So there's definitely going to be some outgoings. I think there'll be more incoming as well. I think something homegrown, which I mentioned in the past, perhaps like a backup left back like Dennis Serkin from Sunderland, which effectively enables to add another player to the European squad, because we have a real homegrown quota problem, and a lot of that is club trained, by the way. And that's why Serkin would particularly appeal. It sounds like Cole Walker-Peters might be going to Besiktas in Turkey. So yeah, there'll be outgoings. Definitely. It's up to Frank to decide what he wants to move on. I still think Son will go. I think it's been quiet over the last couple of weeks, but I think Tottenham obviously want him to go on tour because they're going to South Korea. There's probably some form of obligation that he needs to play and stuff as well. And I think after that, I think Heung-min Son probably will move on somewhere else. I think Bissouma may well move on. Bentancur's in the last year of his contract as well. Could be another one, but that's the next position Tottenham need to get at. I said that at the weekend as well. And number 6 is the next priority. Harry Baker says, hi James, think Madueke to Arsenal is further evidence Chelsea transfer policy is working. Buying young and long contracts means players retain value and can sell for profit with plenty of suitors. So you could look at that either way, right? You could look at that, the positive example like Madueke, agree with you. But you can also look at some others that perhaps haven't worked, like Mudryk would be a different example, right? So I think you can throw that both ways. But I don't know. It's a strange one from Chelsea's perspective, because I mentioned him in reference to Bale, and I did that again at the weekend. I'm not saying he's good at Gareth Bale. I'm not saying that at all. But I see elements of that in him, which makes me think there's a scalability that he could be an absolutely top player. I think there's a question marks over the fit in terms of him going to Arsenal, but in terms of him, the player, I've not really got any doubt about his ability. I think he's a super player with real potential to be a lot better than what we've seen so far. So it feels strange to me that Chelsea would want to sell him. Like, is that just a churn buy now? Because when you buy a young player, you're obviously hoping that they're going to be a top player. Chelsea didn't buy him for a packet of crisps, right? They spent a decent sum on a player that, yeah, let's be honest, most people hadn't particularly heard of when they bought. If it's just a case of, right, buy players for 30, sell them for 50, and this is just about profit and churn, then fine, yeah, it's working. Harry Baker says, just some Club World Cup thoughts from a Chelsea fan. Would mean far more winning this than our last Club World Cup win due to change in format. That's very understandable. I think we are better equipped than Madrid to beat PSG, but still feels impossible. It's definitely not impossible, Harry. It's a one-off football match. Botafogo beat them like 3 weeks ago. So, and I realise it was a slightly understrength PSG, but it was still the majority of the first team played. So it's possible. You got to get the press right. You got to get the defensive shape right. Many of the things I discussed yesterday. I think you're obviously responding the sense I asked yesterday, what would mean more to Chelsea fans? Would it be this, or obviously the first time we'd won it? And I understand that in terms of winning. It's got a lot more credibility. Obviously, winning a 32-team competition when realistically you knew in the old format you were at worst case going to get to the final. So I understand that. OG Naz says, hi James, with just the final to go, how would you score the Club World Cup out of 10? How would I score it? I mean, you did break that down several different bits, but I would say like 5 probably, like if we're just generalising, like right down the middle. But I also accept I haven't got a horse to back in this race, Noz, right? There's no one I'm supporting, there's no one I've been supporting. My interests in it have been as far as I hope PSG do really well so that they go and, you know, extend themselves so that they're perhaps not in the strongest position for when they play my team in the Super Cup. That's as far as my interest from that perspective has gone into this tournament. So I think it's very difficult. And obviously, the majority of football fans haven't had a horse to back in this tournament, right? You've got so many big clubs, your Barca's, your Arsenal's, Liverpool's, Man United's not there, right? Most people don't have a team support in this tournament. And I think from that perspective, it's going to struggle. But the quality of football's been okay. It's obviously very difficult because of the temperatures. I know people like Reece James, as I said, been quite critical of some of the pitch qualities. Hopefully that gets sorted better for next summer. The concepts of the tournament idea is absolutely fine. The problem is obviously which where it fits in the calendar and the amount of games that players are obviously having to play. I think we'll know more sort of in 6 months or so when we'll see how Chelsea perform. Chelsea have obviously gone really deep, done really well in the competition. Will they have a drop-off at some stage next season where a bit of fatigue kicks in? And that could be mental as much as physical. So they're probably at a disadvantage from that perspective. In terms of the tournament, it's fine. The concept's fine. Just most of us ain't got a horse to back, right? So most of us ain't got give a shit. Harry supports Chelsea. It obviously means quite a lot to him. It's perfectly understandable. Mo says, is Clayton okay? Haven't seen him for a while. Clayton's fine. Clayton messaged me yesterday, actually. And he said, oh no, my boy Gibbs White. Because many of you know he had a bit of a thing for having Gibbs White in his fantasy team. Yeah, Clayton's fine. He's obviously out in America. He's doing a lot with his coaching out there at the moment and his studies as well. So he's settling in. Clayton's got an open invitation for whenever he's ready to return to the podcast, but there's also no pressure on him to do so. I pretty much told him to F off till he's got his life sorted and he feels comfortable and he's ready to do so. And if he's not, he's not, but he's absolutely fine. And he'll be welcome back as soon as possible. So if you're watching Clates, yeah, get yourself sorted, come back on the pod, mate. OGFPL says, how do you rate Tottenham's last transfer business so far? I'm not sure what do you mean by last. Do you mean the last 48 hours? Is obviously give an air of positivity. I was telling my dad at the weekend, calm down. This is going to be slow. And actually these last 48 hours have obviously been very fast. And that Gibbs White news yesterday was genuinely shocking. And it took a while to come around to the Mohamed Kudus idea as well, because I'll be very honest, I openly dismissed it at first. I just thought it was no way West Ham would do business with us. But it seems the players obviously pursued it. Tottenham have obviously pursued it really hard as well and have made the deal happen. There's no way I'd have believed 2 weeks ago that deal would have happened. It has. So, look, really good 48 hours or so for us. I think what we've really brought into the team with these two players is added physicality. If I think a lot of the deals done under Ange, and I think of people like Brennan Johnson, some of these other younger players, like there's a weakness. I think Tottenham have looked physically brittle a lot over the last couple of years. And I think these two bring real strength. Morgan Gibbs-White plays with authority about how he plays. And Kudus is really good. And one of his underrated strengths is his ability to hold on to the ball and actually play as a wide player with his back to goal quite a lot. So I think it brings added strength to the team, a bit more physicality. That shouldn't surprise us from what we saw from Thomas Frank's Brentford. So, yeah, look, at the moment, I don't really want to kind of put the mockers on it because Gibbs White's not done, but it obviously highly looks like it is. I think it's a great couple of days for us. Bad Company says, hi, James. Which team do you think has had the most impressive transfer window so far? Additionally, which player do you believe could surprise us this season? Who's had the best transfer window so far? Difficult to say because I need to do a bit more digging into, for example, Sunderland have bought a lot of players this week, although it seems like they're all going to miss AFCON. But some weird coincidence. I guess in terms of best window so far, it's probably Liverpool, isn't it? The strengthening of both fullback positions, the tying down, if you will, to, I know it's back in the last window, tying down Mo Salah and Virgil van Dijk. Obviously, Trent's left, the purchase of Florian Wirtz. I suppose from that perspective, it's Liverpool at the moment, but I guess you have to factor in that there's, 200 odd million gone into those free transfers. But I think Liverpool have strengthened well so far, so I think it's probably them. A player that will surprise, a player that could surprise you this season. How about Noni Madueke doing really well at Arsenal? I wouldn't be surprised about that at all, actually. I wonder what it means. Could we see Saka more in a central area? Is Madueke just going to go and play on the left? I wonder. But as I said earlier, I know there's a real talent within that footballer. I don't actually have any doubt about that. So let's say maybe Noni Madueke will surprise. For the Arsenal fans who are disappointed with it, I don't think we're disappointed with adding a player to your squad. I get it, you might think it's blocking other avenues. But it was such similar noise about Havertz a couple of years ago, and I think Arsenal fans took to him. And he had a difficult period at the start. I think part because of that and the pressure. So get behind it, really. I mean, by all means, criticise your new signing if you want, but I think get behind it. Jiggins this afternoon, James, thoughts on what popular or template picks will be rotation risk for the first few weeks. I don't want another Nkunku situation. Well, the best advice I can give you on that, Jiggins, is like avoid an Nkunku situation is obviously don't pick someone like Nkunku. So let's give you an example. Let's use Chelsea. João Pedro falls into that category, right? João Pedro, outstanding at the Club World Cup and his contributions for Chelsea so far, may even end up winning the competition for them on Sunday. Does that guarantee he starts game week 1? And in any case, even if he did, what about game week 2? I spoke on yesterday's podcast about the will to have João Pedro from Maresca's perspective, particularly against low blocks. Won't always face a low block. Jackson back from suspension for game week 3. Like, it is potentially walking into trouble. Now, it could be good. And that's what we all thought with Nkunku last year, right? Well, if he's going to play there, then I want some of that. So the simple idea is, Jiggins, and is just don't take any. If it's something's a risk, don't take it. Don't take it. It's as simple as that. In terms of players that are risks, I think that would be an example. I think if you look at Tottenham game week 1, it's 3 days after PSG, and it's at home to Burnley. So I would assume Thomas Frank will pick whatever he believes is his strongest lineup against PSG in the Super Cup final. And as it's Burnley 3 days later, we shouldn't rule out the possibility that there'll be changes to even the Tottenham team in game week 1. Now, most teams will pick their strongest team in game week 1. That's why I like it as a bench boost perspective. But I'd have to have an eye kind of really close to things with, say, Tottenham players if I decide to take that route in game week 1. And Tottenham do have good fixtures at the start. Where you've got teams like this, who we're talking about Tottenham at the moment, saying there's too many players there. If you think of the 10 position now as a different example, right, you've got Gibbs White, Maddison, Kulusevski can all play there. You can throw Odegaard there as well. Run in play over 10, you can throw Bergvall there. So many different things Tottenham can do now strategically in terms of how they play. Do you want to take that risk? Now, with the newer guys like Gibbs White, Kudus, you think, probably going to go straight in, aren't they? You would think, but we don't know. So it's like probably not take the chance. So if you're worried about picking up an Nkunku situation again, don't take a chance on that. Don't take a chance on a player like that. It's simple as that. Go for tried, tested, proven. I would think across the first couple of weeks it's not so much of a problem. But it's only, I'll give you an example, right? Isak, I think, is probably on paper to me, if I wanted to take on Mo Salah and Erling Haaland at the start of the season, I think like Isak at home to Wolves, game week 4, perfectly reasonable as a captaincy. Right. When I picked my team in game week 1, I got no idea of what day Newcastle were playing in the Champions League after that game in game week 4. Now, we might have to look at it differently this year where, I don't know, hypothetically, the Newcastle were playing away to, I don't know, Inter Milan on Tuesday. Like, is Isak a certain starter on a Saturday? Nowhere knowing going to game week 1. If Newcastle are playing on a Thursday and that first set of Champions League fixtures is Tuesday to Thursday, no concern. There's no way I can know that walking into game week 1 because the draw will be like the day before game week 3. So I think from game week 4, loads of question marks. And you can't know going into the season who's going to play Saturday and then Tuesday. You could look at Man City playing Man United, so it's probably on the Sunday in game week 4, right? It's probably partly why we didn't get the September TV fixtures on Wednesday, right? What happens? Man City, Man United, 4:30 on a Sunday. Police have got to operate it. Yeah, but if Man City are playing Tuesday in the Champions League, can't happen. So then what, the police at short notice have got to move the Manchester derby. Yeah, don't be surprised if that's like 12:30 on a Saturday, even if it is probably still picked up by Sky. I wouldn't be surprised if that's like a good reason why we haven't got the September TV picture. So once we hit game week 4, for the clubs in Europe, it's like impossible to say. The clubs with the bigger squads at the moment are the hardest reads, aren't they? Louis says, rat kudos, penny for Suj's thoughts. I'd say it truthfully, Suj isn't that bothered. And I know that because we discussed that on our Patreon podcast last Wednesday. It's actually a transfer that makes a lot of sense for West Ham. They need some money into the squad to be able to get Graham Potter the sort of players that he wants. And realistically, their two star most sellable assets are Kudus and Bowen, right? They both want to play on the right. That's the best position for the both of them. It actually makes logical sense for West Ham to sell him. And I think that's how Suj looked at it. He doesn't have the tribalism thoughts about it in terms of that, he's going to Tottenham. Others will. I think ideally West Ham would have sold to someone else, right? Because it just sends a bad signal to many of their own supporters. Suj isn't that bothered. Suj knows that I think the priority for West Ham is got to do something with that central midfield. That central midfield is nowhere near good enough to play Graham Potter ball. They've got to do that. They can't do it heavily because the investment they made last summer, so they had to make at least one big sale. And actually, logically, because of the quality of Bowen, it made sense to sell Kudus. A player was often playing out of position, often on the left for West Ham. He wants to play on the right. It makes sense. So Suj isn't that bothered, mate. Reece C says, reckon Spurs fork out the money on a passer, tempo, setting midfielder, or is that midfield done with Morgan Gibbs-White joining? I mean, I hope not. I hope, obviously, Tottenham do go ahead and push for Adam Wharton's name was mentioned quite a lot in Tottenham circles last night. I have no idea if that's something that's possible or not. That would also obviously cost a lot of money. And as much as I like Wharton, there has to be some question marks in terms of his availability over the last year or so in terms of injuries. There'd be a consciousness about that. So, but yeah, that's what Tottenham have got to pursue next. If Tottenham just went and dealt with that between now and game week 1, I'd be pretty happy with that. Not desperate for anything else. Yes, to be honest, Dennis Sir can get in just for the home quota stuff, basically. OGFPL says, if Mbeumo joins United, what's his price and what price and position do you think Cunha will be on FPL? Well, the thing is, that price now may come out before he goes. Now, I'm sure FPL Towers and the people involved in the price will be aware that it's probably likely that Mbeumo was the second highest scoring player in the game last year at Brentford. I don't think we can be shocked that even if he's still listed as a Brentford player, that he comes in at, say, 9.5. For me, that would be perfectly justifiable on his season and the scalability of what he can be, whether he stays or whether he moves. So I think around about that mark, personally. Cunha, I think less. I think there's question marks in terms of the position at the moment, and I'd say that because of, obviously, the Mbeumo deal's taking a while to happen. What if Manchester United don't buy at 9? Could Cunha end up being that? Now, then we could end up with an absolutely super, obviously, OOP player who's a 9. But how will he fit in at United in the sense, clear talisman at Wolves may not be that at Manchester United. I would have him high, probably sort of the 8.5 bracket and arguably a midfielder. I think slightly less than Mbeumo just because of what Mbeumo achieved last season. OGFPL says, who do you think will take pens at Man United? I would think Bruno Fernandes still would be the most likely, mate. I don't particularly see why that would change. Obviously, Mbeumo is an outstanding penalty taker. And I'm sure Bruno will give them up sometimes because that's what he does. But I would still think that would most commonly be Bruno. Alex Mewett says, hi, James. You reckon Odebear is more likely to head out on loan now? And if so, where do you think would be a good spot for him? Yeah, it's a possibility. Burnley's in mind because obviously they've got promoted back. And that's obviously where he was before. So in terms of, obviously it's a different manager now and a different style. But in terms of like the surroundings, it would be familiar to him. I don't know if that's something Burnley would be interested in potentially looking at. I would say, yes, that's a possibility. Much of that, again, might hinge on what Tottenham decide to do positionally with Brennan Johnson, the future of Heung-min Son, and also Manor Solomon as well. So it might be that the outcomes of what Frank wants to do with those other 3 players could have a real bearing on that. Therefore, I think any decision on that would probably be quite late in the window, but I wouldn't be surprised, yes, if he moved out on loan. He's definitely good enough to play regularly for someone else in the Premier League at the moment already. I have no doubt. I really like Wilson Odebear. Good ball carrier. I think he's someone that would have been well suited, maybe more to Ange's system than Thomas Frank's, but he's got good potential, Wilson Odebear. Really likeable player. Sean Seaton says, loving the pre-season content, mate. Do you think with increased games on TV, meaning additional Friday night kickoffs, the lack of team leaks will spice up the game a bit? Just a note on the Friday night games. One of them might move, yeah. Villa Palace, if Palace get thrown out the Europa League and go in the Conference League, Villa Palace will move back to the Sunday, so you might lose one there and then. And I've warned our Villa fans about that in terms of their planning already. Be careful, because if Palace drop to the Conference League, that won't be a Friday deadline. And we should also have a consciousness that arranging Friday night games gets much, much tougher once, obviously, the European competition starts and domestic cup competitions. So it makes complete sense in the opening period of the season to have Friday night games. No reason why not to. No one's playing midweek fixtures primarily. The Villa Palace ones slotted in there nicely, obviously, because it's Carabao Cup round 2, that midweek before. So those two don't have involvement in that midweek. Once teams have got midweek involvement, yeah, you're not going to get like 33 Friday night games. There will be more. I mean, that's been well documented. So I think wherever the opportunity exists, there'll be a keenness to do it. But it's not going to be like Friday deadlines all the time. In terms of its relevance to team, does it spice the game up a little bit? I don't like Friday deadlines. There's too much going on for me from a content perspective. I much prefer the Saturday lunchtime. The only good thing about it is it's like, right, Friday night, okay, I know I'm not got to work Saturday morning. I don't think it'll make a lot of difference, to be honest, Sean. Louis says, the Arsenal fan base are already hating on Madueke. What are your thoughts on the transfer, and do you think he'll be a good backup for Saka? Covered a little bit, Louis, so just keep it short and sweet. I think if the season was starting tomorrow, he starts left wing for Arsenal. That would be my first thought process. In terms of backup for Saka, I mean, that's being backup to the impossible, right? We're talking about legitimately one of the best right wingers in the world. And Madueke is a player of brilliant potential that if they did lose Saka, like they did for a while last year, obviously having Madueke would cover that much better. But I don't think Madueke's gone to Arsenal to play backup. I'll leave it there for the moment. It's going to be very dependent on what else Arsenal do. We expect them to do more business, right? Dermot Whelan says, hi James, do Liverpool potentially now need 2 strikers this transfer window, with Nunes on his way to Napoli and the passing of Jota, rest in peace? He's very uncomfortable talking about this with obviously what's happened with Jota. Wirtz, in theory, can play the position similarly to how Jota was playing it early last season. I did a piece on Jota and his positioning early in the season on Talking Tactics yesterday. So the answer is no, not necessarily. It's possible he might have even left anyway. I have no idea. In terms of Nunes to Napoli, I'm not aware that that's definitively happening. But I think, yeah, it's highly likely that it will be moved on. Does Luis Diaz now stay? There was plenty of talk of him maybe moving on. Difficult to say, Dermot. Also very uncomfortable. He's still quite fresh. Very difficult to talk about at this moment in relation to what's happened with Jota. There'll definitely be one more of some form. I wouldn't be surprised if Ekiteke ended up there, actually. Medigum31 says, hello everyone. Is it reasonable to go from the start with Frimpong, Kirkes and Wirtz without Salah and Haaland? Pricing obviously going to be very important here, mate. But ultimately, when you're talking about not going with Salah and Haaland, you need to think about what your plan will be from a captaincy perspective. So if you're trying to fit in those, they'll still be well-priced Liverpool players, right? I mean, you might be talking about a spend there that's, I don't know, off the top of my head, 21 million or so for those 3 players. If that's denying you alternatives, Saka's, Palmer's, Isak's, Watkins, etc., Bumo's, Cunha, whatever you want, then the argument would maybe be no, right? So you still need to have good options in terms of captaincy if you're looking to take both of those 2 players on. And that would probably take priority over having the best alternatives from Liverpool. Remember, they do play obviously Newcastle and Arsenal in 2 and 3. So I'm not sure about the treble up potentially. Barry Johnson says, hi James, where do you think Jack Grealish might end up? And is there a team that he could go to that would make him an FPL option for you? With Jack Grealish, I had this conversation with Johnny Pringle in the past, and I know it's relevant to Man City and it might not be elsewhere, but what we'd kind of deemed with Jack Grealish during the course of the last couple of years was you had to see it to know that you could go there, i.e., well, Grealish will get a run of minutes now. The output hadn't really been there from the fantasy perspective, and I would need to see it first to think that that was an option. The club I've mentioned with him a few times is Everton. I think would be the right sort of move for him. I think with Villa, because they want to reduce the cost of their wage spend, that would be a really difficult move for Villa to do, I think, even if it was on loan. I think something like Everton under someone like David Moyes, with them going into the new stadium, and then may even free up and die to playing at like a more central area, or maybe Jack will even go back to playing in a more central area himself. I think Everton would be a really nice sort of fit. Maybe take him on loan, take a big chunk of the wages, review it at the end of the year. I think something like Everton would maybe be a good move for Jack. I hope it works out for him, whatever he does next. Ollie L says, does Kudus and Morgan Gibbs-White signings make Solanke a much better FPL pick? In theory, should do. just purely from the perspective of two players who obviously draw opponents to them, right? Kudus is not the sort of player, if he's got up ahead of steam, that you kind of want to be left sort of 1v1 dribbling. Excuse me. And even from the right-hand side, he's still sort of a player that would be really capable of getting towards the touchline. I think back to a goal he assisted late in the 23-24 season against Luton as a really good example of that. Gibbs White, I think, has got more variety in his distribution than any other player in the Tottenham squad. And that enables, more balls from deeper over the top, intricacy in terms of linking the play. So in theory, yes. But he might not even start game week 1. With Dominic Solanke's going to spend 90 minutes running around PSG on the Wednesday before, can we rule out that Richarlison doesn't start against Burnley? I can't make that decision until the PSG game's gone. Now, I'd like to start with Dom, by the way. I think as it stands, that would probably be the Tottenham player that would interest me most, but make no decision on that until I come back from Italy, mate. Damien Bruin says, afternoon, James. Just a random one. Do you follow any other sports, cricket or rugby specifically? Much love from the rugby world champs and world test champions, South Africa. No DNA, just RSA. Interested. No, not particularly, Damien. I'm a glory hunter when it comes to world sports. If the Olympics is on, yeah, you can catch me watching it. Rugby World Cup, yeah. 50 over or 20 over World Cups, yeah, maybe. Snooker World Championships, Wimbledon, I've caught little bits of it recently. Yeah, I'm a glory hunter from that perspective. The World Darts Championship, I only watched the darts in December, January. Yeah, I'm a glory hunter from that perspective. So no, there's nothing else specifically I watch, mate. Henri Yaron says, is Declan Rice a viable option this season, playing more advanced? Free kicks, corners, which they prefer, them depends. Arsenal budget mid. Declan Rice will tick over fine. I wouldn't necessarily assume that Zubamendi coming in is going to make him more advanced necessarily. I wouldn't assume that at all. Particularly if Arsenal obviously do get their number 9 deal done. Could it be Havertz and Odegaard as 8s, for example? I wouldn't assume that at all. And you might therefore see there's maybe even a little bit more rotation for Declan Rice this year. So, look, if he was to come in at 5.5, very interested. I think I want to say it was 6.5 last year, wouldn't be for me. I'd want to be targeting a player that I thought could get double figures in goals. And that's not to say he can't, but I'd want a natural goal scorer for that sort of price. Shamil Galani says, how are you feeling about Kudus, the Judas, coming to Spurs? If you don't know, well, Suj is away. Sham is joining me on our Patreon podcast on Wednesday. Yes, it's going to be free for everyone, as I said on socials. And we're going to call it Kudus to Judas, although I may add in brackets for you, Sham. Stop crying. Jacob Hinchcliffe says, hello, James. Hello, buddy. What a great appearance you had on the pod the other day. Says, having successfully manifested Gibbs White to Spurs, who would you see as the needle mover signing for my team, Arsenal? I mean, it's the 9, isn't it? I don't think that definitively has to be Gyökeres or Sesko or whatever the solution is, but the needle mover for Arsenal is probably going to be defined by, getting a number 9. I would think Jacob has got to be you'll know it. I think it's probably got to be the priority. You've looked after the issue with central midfield with Zubamendi and Norgard coming in. Madareki's obviously going to offer you something different as well. It's the 9 now, isn't it? Probably a little bit I'd be happy with just a 6. That'll do for now. You'd probably be the same, I would think, with a 9. Engisman says, who had the best transfer market? Someone else asked that, mate, so thank you, but I'm going to skip. Field Buck says, all right, James, I'm off to bed as I live in Australia. Just wanted to say keep up the good work and hope you're excited for the new Spurs signings. I'm a Pompey fan, but just happy for you lot. Thank you, mate. I have to say, one of the things I discussed on that Patreon podcast with Suj last week before he went away was saying I'd be quite happy if Tottenham didn't play for another couple of months. Just keep enjoying the experience I had in Bilbao and stuff and hold that, because once you start playing again, it's kind of done. But now I can't wait to get to Reading in 8 days' time and see these new players and see what the new manager's got in terms of his ideas. So now I'm ready. Now I think I'm ready to get back. It doesn't mean I've forgotten what happened, but I'm ready now. Yeah, my excitement's kicked in. That Gibbs White news yesterday, honestly, blew me away a bit. Jiggins says, last one for me. If Saka and Gyökeres are both priced at 10, who would you buy if you had to pick one? That's interesting, because I did a piece again, it's freely available to all our Patreon members at the moment on our midweek dilemma, where I looked at potentially starting with both. I looked at the idea of starting with both, making then a decision after a game of information of which one to captain in game week 2, and then selling one in game week 3, or maybe even both. Ideally not both, because I wouldn't really want to use 2 transfers that early, but let's be honest, it may happen. So possibly both. I think what that will come down to, Jiggins, for me, if I have to make that choice, is confidence in Gyökeres to hit the ground running if it happens. Because it might be quite suddenly we're like, he's the best captaincy option in game week 2. I mean, that's very viable that's a possibility. What's the impact of Madueke on Saka during pre-season, for example? A few unknowns at this stage. But there is an idea in the back of my mind at the moment to possibly start with both. At the moment, I suppose at this moment in time, one of them's an Arsenal player and one isn't. So at this moment, the obvious answer is Saka as it stands, right? Josh Davis says, hi James, it seems like Jan Lange is doing a proper job at the moment. I wondered how many former Spurs director of football technical directors you have had in that Rain Man football memory of yours. Loads. I'd say the one that devastated me, really shook me up. It didn't have a huge consequence on us, was with Frank Arne. We'd had Frank Arneson for a year. Kind of David Pleat had done the job in the early 2000s. Frank Arneson did the job for a year, and we brought so many players in. I was like, wow, what's this? And a lot of them young, and then Chelsea poached him. Then we had, not Jack Stantini. He bloody managed us. Who was the guy? Damien Comoli, who also did the job at Liverpool for a bit. We had Damien Comoli. He was all right. There were hits and misses, I would say, among that period. And then we've had people kind of unofficially in the position. Obviously, we've had Fabio Paratici more recently, but it was a model within the club for a while not to have it. But there were people helping with the recruitment side, kind of in unofficial terms. I'm 50-50 on Lange, I have to say. I'm 50-50 on him. Next up is Callum says, all the teams around Villa fighting for the top 5 are strengthening and we are doing no business. Losing Rashford and Asensio from last year. Can you see us being left behind next season? There's challenges for Villa. I think the start is good. And I think that's should be helpful in terms of if you have to make late deals, which you might, to then potentially bed them in and not feel like I've got to hit the ground running so much. Whereas take a different case like Sunderland have done a lot of business this week. They're opening 3 fixtures. They've got to get results at the start. They'll feel like so they absolutely want like the players in place really quickly. It's very understandable logic. Doesn't feel quite such a stress for Villa, I feel. There probably needs to be some outgoings that's going to have a big influence on this, Callum. So like I said previously, there might be people like Leon Bailey, Luca Dean on decent salaries. Maybe that needs to be moved on first. Then you are going to feel like you are down sort of circa 6 players or so from the back end of last season. So Villa might have to be a little bit clever in what they're doing. But look, they've found gems in the past like Morgan Rogers from Middlesbrough, right? So they might have to just operate a little bit differently in the short term just because they need to get the wage level in line with what the turnover is. Had Villa qualified for the Champions League, it would have been such a help. Europa League just doesn't throw up the money in the same way, unfortunately. Tom Hines says, hi James, listen to the pod of Spotify. Never caught your YouTube channel before. Happily subscribe. Thank you, Tom. And for those watching in along live, or on repeat, a like and a sub goes a long way. Tom Sleeman says, is there any truth in Spurs signing Adam Wharton? No idea. I referenced him earlier. Something I'd be happy with. Many will know from sort of even before the Euros last year what I thought about Adam Wharton and why I'd liked him in that squad. I really like him. He's progressive, forward-thinking central midfield player. I have question marks about him in terms of defensively in that position. I think very much helped in the sense that in the structure at Crystal Palace, he's only got 3 centre-backs behind him. But in terms of him, the footballer, yeah, love him. And concerns about the injury record a little bit as well, Tom. Jerry W says, hello, Jimbo. With how a lot of people praise Thomas Frank's appointment, do you reckon he'll be the next Spurs great, like Bill Nicholson or even Sir Alex Ferguson levels in terms of achievement? Jerry, it's just way too early to be putting Thomas Frank's name in with these people, mate. Talking about two of the greatest football managers of all time, mate. I've not even seen a pre-season friendly yet, mate. So the answer's no, mate. Jerry says, with Forest losing the Langer and Gibbs White, do you reckon Forest ends up mid-table just below 10th due to European commitments and their dip in expected data towards the end of last season? Like, I think that would have been a possibility anyway, even if those two players had stayed. Because the double up to Thursday, Sunday is so different, particularly even worse for them. In terms of their Premier League season, it will be more difficult if they bump up to the Europa League as well, right? So, as said earlier, we knew they'd need to get more players in terms of like their squad depth. So, big month or so for Forest. No doubt they'll spend the money again. We know that they've been keen to do it. I remember back in January getting linked with Cunha, right? So, I'm pretty confident Forest will put out a couple of big ones, actually. And they'll be fine. Like, no major concern for them. But that change of going to Thursday, Sunday for a club who's not had to do it before, it cannot be understated. It really does change things massively. So there would have been a chance that may have happened anyway. Doesn't mean, by the way, that now those two players are gone that I think Forest will struggle to stay up. Like, no, not at all. It'll be fine. Damien Bryan says, love the channel. Looking forward to the season, all upcoming pods. Smash a like and make sure to subscribe. Thank you, Damien. Josh Davis says, also, apologies if covered, but I plan to listen back to it over on Patreon later. It's free, guys. That's Josh's words, not mine. But is there anyone you wouldn't mind being sold now that you would have been worried about losing? I presume you're asking, is a Tottenham player to be sold that I would have been worried about losing? No. No one. I mean, even like with Romero, I wouldn't have been that bothered, mate. Because unfortunately for Kuti, the 9 out of 10 can be followed by the 4 out of 10. Happy for him to stay, of course. I'm not like pushing him out the door, but no one. I've even referenced with Mickey van der Ven that like next hamstring injury would be like, I'm scared for you, genuinely. And I said this a number of weeks ago that I felt that just if suddenly, I don't know, PSG came in with like a monster bid for Van der Ven, that like genuinely Tottenham should really consider it. And I know like you can't replace that pace and stuff, but it's not as relevant now that Ange has gone. I think he has a lot to do in terms of his proving his more basic aspects of defending around the penalty box, in terms of his timing, his heading. But obviously in terms of what he can be, like, it's almost irreplaceable. So there's both sides of that. But yeah, if Tottenham got an offer that they just felt was too good to be true on Van der Ven, like, yeah, move it on. I've said this a lot, and I said this after the Europa League final. It's not like these players are all, they'll get remembered very, very fondly, but it's not like winning that competition suddenly blinded me to make me think they're all brilliant, world class. That team needs mass improvement. It's beginning to get it. So no, there's no one, Josh, that I would have any fear over Tottenham selling. I wouldn't. If you said one, I'd be like, no, I want him to stay. I want to see what he does under Thomas Frank. The one I would say most actually is probably Pedro Porro. Yahya Fazani says, hi James, I'm a Barca fan, and seeing PSG and their dominance got me thinking what it would take for us to beat them. What do you think is the main thing we'd need? More OOP coaching signings? I think you were talking out of possession coaching signings, yeah. Style here, and you'll know there were many similarities. You obviously had Luis Enrique before. There are similarities that you'll recognise, no doubt about that, between this PSG and Enrique's Barca, and obviously Pep's Barca before that as well. There are some similarities, no doubt about it. It feels similar just stylistically watching them. It's interesting, I meant to say this yesterday, but one of the teams that had the most success, ironically, against Barca, particularly under sort of like Pep's era and even before that under Frank Rijkaard, it was Chelsea, right? I know much of that was under Mourinho, but not always. So maybe Chelsea will have a little blueprint for Sunday, possibly. You've got to get it right defensively. And in a weird way, it's way more difficult for Real Madrid. If you think about Madrid on Wednesday night, I said the statistic yesterday, PSG had 77% of the ball in the first half. And consider that they were winning that half for 80% of it, basically, right? So there's no game state influence here or anything, right? You know how alien that is for Real Madrid to have the football for only 23% of a half of football. That's so alien. It is really, in a weird way, it would be easier for, let's use a reference just because we're speaking about them recently, it would be easier for Nottingham Forest to defend Paris Saint-Germain than Real Madrid. Does that make sense? So a side like Botafogo, who went low, made it tough, were a side that was set up much better to hurt PSG. If Chelsea come out the blocks flying on Sunday, like, right, we're just going to take you on man for man, they can do some man-to-man stuff off the ball. Doesn't mean you just have to go low block, but if you get it wrong, you're dead. If they go out there thinking we're just going to outplay these, you're getting bait. No one is going to outplay them at the moment. If my team go to Udine in August and we're just going to treat this like a friendly and like just focus on what we're doing like in terms of our attacking play, we will get mullered by a similar score to what Inter Milan got beat and Real Madrid got beat this week. It'll be similar. So difficult to do. You have to get the pressing structure right. Doesn't mean you have to do one thing specifically. Like, you don't have to go necessarily just complete low block. You can still go man to man. You can make life difficult. But where they're so varied and different as well for me is like with the two wide players, they're so quick at getting the ball out to them if anyone goes and presses. Like their direct running ability. Who wants to be left one-on-one versus Dewey and Kvaratskhelia? It's a nightmare. They've got all the tools at the moment. And I think as well, I didn't say this yesterday, but obviously there's a lot of people like PSG for for many reasons in terms of ownership, etc., etc. I find it impossible to watch that football team and remind myself of that and not just enjoy them. And that's how I felt about your Barcelona teams as well. Harry Dawson says, good day all. Any idea on the day the game goes live? Must be getting some price reveals soon, surely. I will tell you that what I said on, I don't know what podcast, forgive me, but I'd had a tip off a couple of weeks ago that the intention was the week beginning the 21st. And I messaged that person back and I said, I would be surprised if that's that late. And they said, yep, I'd probably be surprised too, but that seems to be the word going around. And I had someone else potentially back that up this week as well and saying that it could be the 21st. Right? That's not accurate intel as far as I'm concerned, but that's the second time I've got that message from different sources. So I find the fact that it's Friday now that I would say it's unlikely. I'm going away after Thursday. I don't think the game's going to be open before I go on holiday. We might have stuff next week, like some price reveals and stuff like that, but I don't think the game will be opening next week. I think it will probably be that week after now. OG FPL says, how many more players do you think Spurs will sign and what positions? Not many, mate. The only way it would be a lot more now is if there were like some surprise outgoings, like, you know, Solanke suddenly left or Van der Ven or stuff like that. You know, if Heung-min Son leaves Tottenham at this stage, Tottenham aren't really in a position, I think, to necessarily go and replace that, really. I think it's there within the squad. Tottenham have too many players at the moment, so there won't be much more, mate. No. Andrew Sands says, acknowledging you've not seen a Spurs Frank team, which of last season's fringe young players who played more minutes than expected will stay around the first team? Archie Gray's the obvious one to say, and Bergvall feels like he's really established himself, and he is young. Yeah, I'd be so surprised if, say, Bergvall went on loan. Archie Gray pretty much can't, again, because of Tottenham's homegrown issue in terms of registering players for European competition. I'd be astonished if Bergvall went anywhere. So they're the main two. In terms of involvement of others, people like Mikey Moore, he's obviously going to find it a lot more difficult, but he's also still so young. Not sure you'd want him to go out on loan necessarily. So I don't think there'll be a lot of change from that perspective. Obviously, there were a number of kids who ended up getting some fairly significant minutes because of the injury issues and stuff. I touch wood, that's not going to happen again. Mikey could go out on loan. I think it's probably too early for someone like Luka Williams-Barnett, who you might not be familiar with, or Luka Vuskovic, who's joined the club permanently at centre-back. I know there's big interest in him from the Bundesliga at the moment. He may go out on loan before any of us see him. I hope to see him next week at Reading. Until he looks at them properly, Andrew, it's really difficult to say, mate. And we'll get a feel straight away from pre-season games, mate. Probably from the first one. Jerry says, with Spurs seemingly loaded with 10s and 8s, I don't think we're loaded with 8s, mate. Is there a chance Frank uses 3-5-2 in big matches like he did in Brentford against big teams, or no chance? Of course there is, because we're loaded with centre-backs as well. And let's not pretend that Tottenham couldn't, think of it like this, move Kudus alongside Solanke as an example, play them as two. You can both play into them a little bit more direct as well, both quick on the turn. And Tottenham could play with like Udogie and Porro as wing backs. Definitely could be done. And you play a back three of Danso, Romero, Van der Ven. Well, that's what finished Europa League final, right? So yeah, definitely is something that could happen. I'm fairly certain that's not the intention, just generally, by the way. But yeah, if we play at the Emirates or Etihad game week 2, yeah, I don't think we should rule that out, and I wouldn't have a problem with it either. Damien Bryan says, thoughts on Sunderland business thus far? Anything that could be interesting for FPL? Honest answer is, Damien, I haven't done the research yet, but I will absolutely promise you that me and David Hunter will be covering Sunderland's new signings on the transfer window show next Tuesday. Nigel Walters says, hi James, what is your take on the prospect of changes being made to the game? Smash that like button. What changes? Is this like AI badges and stuff like that? And give shit. Like, some people are like it. I mean, it makes no difference to me, mate. If that's what you're referring to, I don't know what to say on top of that, mate. Joel Barron says, which tactical role, for example, inverted left right back from the 21-22 season will define the 25-26 season? And if have any ideas, which manager will bring this to the fore? Just quite deep, Joel. They asked me to do inverted in 21-22 now. That's the first year back after COVID. Was anyone even particularly doing it at that point? Don't even think Arteta was doing it at Arsenal at that point. Only been Pep, really. So I'm not sure I'm following the question, Joel, in terms of the relevance of what happened like 4 seasons ago to what had happened now. I'm not really sure what to say to that. So I'm going to say Zinchenko when he joins Burnley. He says, with how serious Leeds and Sunderland have been in this window, is this the time where at least one promoted team will survive and the likes of Forest and Brentford down after losing star player? I don't think Forest has been in trouble. Brentford's obviously unpredictable. Looks like they're signing Jordan Henderson. That's really big for them because of, we spoke with Tom Med on Wednesday about, obviously, lots of focus on Mbeumo and Frank, but you lost your captain, Christian Norgard, as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Henderson just goes in there as captain. I don't think we should rule that out as a possibility. Though the suggestion is it probably, as Tom said, may well be Nathan Collins. So I think that's a smart signing for Brentford at the moment. To get a little bit of stability into that football club. He's done the blocks, Jordan Henderson. He knows what he's doing. But yes, there's a chance Brentford will dip. Wolves, West Ham, there's a few I'd be concerned about to put in that bracket more than Nottingham Forest at this moment. Bournemouth, if they had attacking injuries on top of the amount of defensive players they've lost, that would have no concern about them at this moment, but they need to do something defensively, it's fairly clear. So could decide, look, Leeds and Sunderland and Burnley have all shown quite a bit of intent. That's good to see. And from a neutral perspective, let's hope that at least one of them does stay up. Remy says, thoughts on how Spurs will line up? Yeah, if we're playing PSG tomorrow, goalkeeper and back four as expected. I don't need to explain that, do I? If we're playing PSG, truthfully, I think probably Bentancur, Bergvall, Gibbs White, Kudus right. I wouldn't be surprised if Johnson left, Solanke up front. That's the first game on my mind, mate. Burnley afterwards, something very different. Maybe bringing in Maddison, you're bringing in Tell, you're bringing in Richarlison, you're bringing in Jed Spence, one of the fullbacks. You're not playing with maybe an out-and-out 6. Like, Tottenham could, in theory, name 2 different teams at this moment, right? They won't, right? Because a number of players are going to leave. But till I see them play, mate, it's a little bit immaterial at this stage. And I think Tottenham need to get back away from thinking, this is the best 11, right? 11 good players ain't good enough, mate, when you're playing in the Champions League as well. You need to have sort of at least like 16, where Tottenham need to get back to a situation, truthfully, shit for fantasy this, but need to get back to a situation where I go to the game and I don't know who's going to play. And if Solanke's not in the team, I don't have a meltdown about, oh my God, Dom's not playing, and be like, all right, cool. It's a bit of rotation. This is what we expect now. Right, I'm going to cover off, I'll tell you what, I can see down to Tricky MF. I'm going to go all the way down to Tricky MF. and then I'll call it a day there. Although Tricky MF's got 2 questions, but he's got 2. I'll get to the second one. Birth Media says, hi James, the Spurs title contenders. No, mate. Tricky MF says, how do you see Brentford getting on? What do you think of Brighton signing more young talent? Where do you see Harvey Elliott next season? What are the under 21s? Any breakthroughs? Thanks, James. I'm going to do them all really quickly. Brentford have just spoken about. Brighton, it's their model, so it's no surprise. Wouldn't be surprised if Harvey Elliott now ended up at Nottingham Forest. That would appear to maybe make sense. And the under 21s, in terms of what breakthrough to what the England squad next summer, I'm going to guess maybe you mean Livramento and Elliot Anderson will be the main 2. Tom Hines says, watch 0 minutes of the Club World Cup. You don't. If you're apologising for it, you shouldn't. And I don't think that you are anyway, mate. Ewok Templar says, hi, James. Can Frank get the best of Kudus like he did with Mbumo? I hope so, mate. It'd be really shit if I sat here and went, no chance, mate, wouldn't it? I bloody hope so, mate. Lukey Boy says, hi, James. No question from me, but thanks for the great content this week, including all the great stuff on Patreon. Have a great day, mate. Thank you. I'll cover that once I've done Tricky's bit at the end, just to plug Patreon a bit. Tom Hans says, I absolutely need a break from football, so the Club World Cup was just too much. That's perfectly understandable, mate. I wouldn't have watched half of what I've watched if it wasn't for doing the pods for you guys. Dom Dewsbury says, I watched some of the Club World Cup, whilst most of it was meh. The City Al Hilal game in particular was very interesting. Yeah, one that I didn't see, typical. Goopy says, how viable do you see Bench Boost 1 being this year? I understand you've mentioned it in podcasts, but is there a chance for a huge double this year? There's a chance because something happens. Let's be honest, right? We had a terrible, tragic event last week here with the passing of Diogo Jota. I don't think Liverpool would have played last weekend, right? So something can happen down the line that creates something that means that we do end up with that, but there's no expectation on it. The calendar looks very similar to how it did last year, right? In terms of how viable Bench Boost 1, not as viable as I thought maybe when I looked at it a couple of weeks ago. And that was because of reassessment of my own judgment in terms of some predicted prices for a few players. I think might be a little bit higher than what a few other people think. I may be wrong. I think the viability may be quite dependent on a couple of things. One, finding captaincy rotation to take Salah and Haaland on. And the other being, I need enablers that I can't see at the moment. Something like Declan Rice at 5.5, you go, yeah, that's all right, yeah. Might be able to do that sort of thing. It doesn't have to be right at the bottom price, but I think I don't see attacking a forward that I'd like at sort of anything under sort of 7.5-ish or so at the moment. And I don't see any midfielder that I'd like at sort of under 6. Something has got to be. It only needs maybe one, but something's got to break out there to make it probably viable. Otherwise, at the moment, I think it's probably not, because I'd need too much coverage of, let's kind of say, second-tier players to cover against going against Salah, Haaland, and I think it would be very difficult to do with one or the other of them because of what you have to cut. Remember, you're aiming for 15 players. So to be confirmed. Also, I don't think there's particularly an early wild card on the table, so that makes it more difficult as well. Who knows, mate? Maybe there'll be no arse man this year. Maybe there'll be 2 bench boosts, 2 triple captains, and 2 wild cards and 2 free hits. Who knows? And if that's the case, I will want to do it under that sort of circumstance. TF says, don't you think Neto is a great option game week 1? Chelsea good fixtures. Neto has most minutes seen so far and he's a good attacker. I think Neto's had an outstanding Club World Cup. I spoke about him quite a bit yesterday and on Monday. I don't love him as an FPL asset. I see him way more as provider than finisher, personally. I think Chelsea have really improved, as I spoke about yesterday, about fast breaks and fast attacks. That's really suitable to him as well. Clubs in our league might be a little bit wiser to it, having had a look at that now. So I wouldn't say bad option, but could I sit here now and go, Pedro Neto definitely starts game week 1? Label him in, João Pedro's got, look how João Pedro's done. João Pedro definitely starts game a month away, mate. How these guys going to return from, like, for whatever their pre-season looks like? So difficult to say, isn't it? So I would think now, yeah, sure, Pedro Neto starts game week 1, but what about Jamie Bino-Gittins, mate? I haven't seen that integration yet. So if we go back to the point of, there's nothing wrong with going with Neto, right? If you feel confident in it, by the way, that's fine. If you feel confident, you do it. But to go back to the point really early on in the stream about like an Nkunku, right? So how do you avoid that risk? So this is a really good example. Neto, brilliant Club World Cup. Yeah, returns on the increase. Right, where's Bino Gittins in this? I don't think we're going to get the answer before game week 1. So for me, like if I need that at the start, if I'm looking at him going, right, I'm prepared to take one little punt here and he's going to be it, fine. But if I'm looking at that at the start, it's probably avoidable for me. Because I don't know what the impact of Jamie Bino Gittins is on that. Might be Bino Gittins going to come in, he's going to be second choice, he'll get integrated slowly and Neto be fine for a long period. All these things could be true. If you feel strongly about it, it's fine. I don't think it will be for me. I'd almost rather just get like Enzo Fernandez. Because do you know what? To go back to the Nkunku point, I know he'll play. I don't know where he'll play necessarily, but I know he'll play. I'd want him obviously pushing on and box crashing, but he might end up playing a little bit of a deeper role, say more the Fluminense role where he joined Caicedo in deeper build-up than he did in the Palmeiras game before that. So I'd rather go down that route, I think, to start with, again, to avoid that risk element and not force yourself into early transfers. Tricky MF, last one then. How much are you planning bench boost game week 1 if the chip is still available? Sorry, Tricky, I'm skipping it because I just covered it, mate. It's on my mind, but it's not planned per se. And the piece I did this week, you can have a look at it. It's free. Explains more of a kind of negative mindset towards that opportunity than I'd had a couple of weeks ago. Nice segue and plug before I finish. Thanks for everyone who joined in live. Sorry for those who ain't got to good questions. If you want to drop me a tag on Twitter or Blue Sky, I will happily answer your question there. I got another pod recording in 25 minutes. I have to wrap it up. Patreon, if you want to support the show, you can. Like all the content that's been published this week and next week up to the 17th of July is available for free. There are 18 different bits of content being published. It's all free. You just got to join us on Patreon for free. Don't give me any money. It's free. And you know what the beauty about the content this week as well? A lot of it is timeless. So I've had Patreon guests this week that have been genuinely blown me away how good they've been in terms of guests on the podcast. We had Oni Dozie on Monday talking to us about the influence of black professionals within the Premier League. Tuesday, we had JC giving us an insight in terms of how policing for football matches is done in this country. On Wednesday, I had Paul Parsons join me for a discussion about models and FPL and whether you can still be successful without them. And yesterday, we had a really important conversation with Milan Rashavi, who discussed with us about the impact of mental health within sport and on sports people. And today, Chris O'Connor's joining me for a discussion about the growing influence of American money within this country, the sport generally of football, and also the fan mindset out in America at the moment as well. Next week, I can tell you our Patreon podcast. Sam Brennan's joining me for Q&A. Adam Pritchard's, our Arsenal correspondent, is going to join me on Patreon to discuss the Thomas party and give his view on what's happened. Sham, as I said, is joining me for Tottenham. And Jack Blackbird's going to host a quiz on the opening days of the season for me next week as well. There's still public content as well if you don't want anything additional. I can tell you Gary Mantle's joining me for a review of the Club World Cup final on Monday. Tuesday, as I said, David Hunter's joining me for the transfer window show. Do something on Wednesday FPL wise with Darren Addy and Craig Kemp, formerly from the Man on FPL podcast, doing their own individual work. I hope it's going to be both. That's not quite confirmed yet. We will do something FPL related on Wednesday, but I'm conscious something might happen with the game between now and then. And then on Thursday will be Ask James, be scheduled for 12 o'clock on Thursday. And then I fully intend to take a 2-week break before I return on August the 1st to catch up on everything I've missed. And then correspondent week is Monday, August the 4th. That will be a podcast with all of our correspondents inside 5 days. All 20 correspondents will be on discussing their clubs between August the 4th and August the 8th. So, if you want to support the show, you don't have to pay for it at the moment. Please do so at patreon.com/planetfpl. Anyone's got any questions on it, drop me a DM. Towards the end of next week as well, I'll release a bit about in terms of what the future of us on Patreon looks like and what's available at various tiers. So you can have a look at that for free if you sign up as well. For those who don't wish to do so, it's absolutely fine. But please do smash a like, hit the sub button. For those on the audio, a 5-star review goes a really long way. I hope you all have a great weekend, everyone. Please be nice to each other. And for the benefit of those on the audio, cue music, please, man child.